Welcome, everyone. We are here today to talk about how much we love Qatar and also would like you to get convinced to invest in Qatar. I'm joined here today by a very well-known personality. We all, expats especially, we all love him. It's Mr. Q, Khalifa Al Haroon, also a friend from old days when he was with the QNB Capital. We'll ask him to give us a little bit of his history. There's a lot behind the pretty face that we see on social media. And I also am joined by Akber Khan, who is the senior director at Al Rayan Investment. Before I start, I would like the panelists to introduce themselves, and then we can move to the topic and the agenda. Khalifa.
All right, just wanted to make sure that everybody can hear me. Yes?
Yes.
All right, so just to introduce myself, Khalifa Al Haroon. Some people online, they know me as Mr. Q, your friendly neighborhood Qatari. But of course, today I'm joining you as not the online personality only, but also someone who's invested in a number of different startups. And alhamdulillah, many of them have been quite successful. One of the businesses, of course, being the I Love Qatar network. And of course, when it comes to my background's actually in law. I had a focus on international corporate contract law, as well as trying to focus on environmental law as well. And my background has been working in QNB at QNB Capital, and then focusing on debt capital markets, and then shifting over to Vodafone, where at the time it was, of course, quite a unique experience, working, in a telco. And then later on, of course, joining the football realm in the Qatar Stars League. So, and then now I'm at the Qatar Football Association.
Sure. Thanks, Khalifa, for your brilliant introduction. I'm sure we'll hear a lot more from you with your experience in investing in Qatar and small and medium enterprises and startups. Akber, kindly introduce yourself to our audiences.
Thank you, Mohsin, and it's a pleasure to be here with yourself and with Khalifa. So I look after the asset management business of Al Rayan Investment, which is a subsidiary of Masraf Al Rayan. I've been in Qatar now since 2009, so a little bit more than 11 years. Prior to this, I was in London. I used to work for Deutsche Bank, where I was also for 11 years. So I've been in this investment industry for more than 20 years now, half in London and half in Qatar. So looking forward to seeing how Khalifa and I and Mohsin can have this conversation in a slightly different way to usual, I think, because we've done the Qatar story. We've done a similar, but we've done a webinar on Qatar in the past, but this is going to be, I think, a little bit different and with the Khalifa's magic on top.
Inshallah, inshallah. A lot of pressure, but we'll try.
So thank you, everyone, again. With that introduction, I think I have been part of your QSE webinar journey since March. That when the pandemic began, we started to engage with a lot of you online. We have held many discussions in the past. Today, we will be talking about invest in Qatar and its QATR. A lot of people reached out to us and said we have spelled it incorrectly, but it is not the case. QATR is the ETF, Islamic ETF that is listed on the exchange since 2 years now. And that's what we'll be talking about mostly. But before that, I think let's take a step back and see how Qatar has done. I've been in Qatar for almost 18 years now, and Qatar has seen extraordinary growth with various milestones in the past. And the story obviously will continue. But just by comparison, if you look at other markets globally, had you invested, for example, $1,000 back in 2002, today you would have multiplied it by almost 5.7 times had you invested in Qatar. Compared to S&P, it would be only 2.8 times. And in the rest of the world or FTSE, it would be just almost doubled. So clearly, Qatar has shown extraordinary growth in the past 18 years or so. But with that, I think the Sharia-compliant stocks on the indices, the one that we'll be talking about mostly today, Al Rayan Index, that has powered ahead the conventional index by almost an additional 2 times. So if you had invested $1,000 in 13 years ago in Al Rayan Index, today it would be 4 times. So that's definitely a remarkable growth story of Qatar and the Sharia compliant stocks. That has partly been due to the diversification that the Islamic index offers, primarily by having less exposure to the banks and more exposure to the industrial and the consumer goods sector. And as we'll discuss with Khalifa also, consumer sector and the population growth in Qatar has been one of the key drivers of growth in various businesses, including the startups. We were joined by, and the story continues I think we still have the World Cup 2022 ahead of us. And then in 2027, the LNG story will see a 64% growth in Qatar's production capacity. So hopefully the trend of Qatar's growth will continue, and so the investment story as well. We were joined by Mark Mobius, world-renowned investor in emerging markets, and he drew some analogy between the Sharia-compliant stocks and their alignment with the ESG standards. And I would like just to play that for the audience. We do have an ETF also on both the ETF on both the indices listed on the exchange now.
But that's very good. By the way, the Sharia compliant stocks tend to align very nicely with the ESG, high ESG ratings. And of course, with the Sharia stocks, the balance sheet strength tends to be much better because of these strictures. So I'm not surprised to see that the Sharia compliant stocks do so well.
Sure. So essentially, there was a discussion that so Mohsin held a webinar with Mark Mobius. He's been investing in emerging markets for 40 years. Mohsin, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for a very long time, and obviously very seasoned and quite a well-known investor. And he was asked a question during his webinar about Sharia-compliant investing, and he said he thinks it's a very good idea, and he's a big fan of it, just simply because investors who are buying Sharia-compliant stocks effectively are buying companies which meet certain risk management criteria, or to put it another way, are on average lower risk than non-Sharia-compliant companies. And where that risk comes from or doesn't come from is the strength of their balance sheets. So on average, a Sharia-compliant company has a stronger balance sheet than a non-Sharia-compliant company. And that's what Mark was acknowledging and recognizing and actually appreciating as to the benefits of investing in a Sharia manner. And the reason why this is obviously important for what I do is because everything that we do at Al Rayan Investment is Sharia-compliant. So it was nice to have Mark doing the PR for us. Thanks, Mohsin.
Okay. So thanks and apologies for those who couldn't hear the audio. Khalifa, I would like to turn to you now. Of course, I tried to capture the story of Qatar investment growth story, the economy in general. in these few slides in 5 minutes or so. But obviously, the real life experience has been obviously very different, because there are day-to-day challenges when you are investing in startups in the markets. So would you like to share your experience of investing in the Qatari market? How has it been?
Sure, it's my pleasure. I'll be happy to share that. To just share, in the very beginning, with individuals as to what it was like in the past compared to what it is today. There has definitely been significant, improvements and strides. And I think some of the difficulties that I've faced in the past might not be the same difficulties that we have today. And there might even actually be new challenges. To use Isle of Qatar as an example, Isle of Qatar is basically a web it's a media network that focuses on digital content as well as community aggregated news. And so what happened was in the past, when we were trying to establish our organization, we reached out to a number of different institutions, and I'm talking financial institutions as well as regulatory authorities, so that we could make sure that everything was set up as best as possible. And it wasn't easy, because I remember when I went to the Ministry of Economy and Commerce and I had told them about my idea, they were asking, and I wasn't entirely sure what license I required. They had then went and told me that actually maybe you need to focus on the product that you are trying to sell. So I said, what are you trying to sell? So, well, actually we sell advertisements. And they're like, okay, so you're like a magazine. I said, no, we're not like a magazine. We're a digital portal. It's like, okay, so do you sell subscriptions? No, it's not subscriptions. It's completely free, for people to use. They said, okay, well, do you sell access? Like, we don't sell access. We put banners on the side. So at the time, it was just a little bit difficult for people to understand what it is that we were trying to achieve. Eventually, we ended up just applying for every single license under the sun, just because it was the easiest thing to do. So we're talking about, we had applied for media, advertising, marketing, and at the time even events management, because we wanted to do some community events, and that cost quite a lot of money. The second difficulty that we used to face was in regards to trying to get the funding. Obviously, when you're setting up a new business, you're going to either rely on family, friends, or of course, if you don't have the money yourself, or of course, go to a bank to see if you can get a loan. And when I had gone to a couple of the banks, it was really difficult to convince them to invest in a digital startup, regardless of whether I was a Qatari or not. And that just meant that I had to rely on family members, to invest in the project. I then also had the third challenge of when we had gone to different incubators and startup accelerators, and had requested their support, their help to bring the idea to life. The challenge was that there were just some people who just didn't understand what it is that we were trying to achieve, or they tried to mold my project into something that they wanted, which was completely different to what I wanted to achieve. In fact, I remember at one point when I had explained what I Love Qatar was about, and that I wanted to support the community and support charitable causes and spend a significant portion of the profit to do that, I was literally asked one question, which was, Khalifa, or actually it wasn't even a question, it was more of a statement. It was, Khalifa, you need to decide, are you a charity or are you a business? And that made obviously work quite difficult for me, because I wanted to be a business that supported charities as well. And it was at that moment that I decided, you know what, you don't need to tell me what to do. I'm going to decide to do things my own way. And then I was told that maybe I might need to change the direction of the business, because based on their study, there's a lack of information in Arabic online. There was a lack of websites related for women as well. So they wanted to turn Isle of Qatar, and what you know is today, into an Arabic women's website, which was a completely different vision. So sometimes what happens is that you face a number of different difficulties and stumbling blocks along the way. But I can tell you today, when it comes to digital startups and tech businesses, there's definitely a much more bigger drive and appetite in the Qatar Science and Technology Park, or whether it is at the ICT Qatar, or I should say the Digitella, the Digital Incubation Project, and even Cubic, which is the Qatar Business Incubation Center. There is much more of an appetite and much more of an acceptance as people have understood the progress of technology. So I can definitely talk about much more, but give the room to Akbar and yourself, to comment on that. But those were just some of the things, some of the challenges that we faced in the very beginning.
So, I mean, I think obviously those are real life challenges when you are setting up businesses in Qatar and trying to invest in startups. It's difficult to explain to regulators what exactly is it that you're trying to do. I think Akbar probably has a similar story when he was trying to launch the ETF, because it's something also that he was doing for the first time in Qatar. And Akbar, you want to share that experience in terms of how long it took to launch this product?
Sure. So the ETF, and we'll talk about what an ETF is maybe in a little bit more detail as well. But as part of the story, all ETFs generally track some sort of an index. So when you buy an ETF, you're buying the performance of an index. That performance could be the S&P 500, it could be the FTSE 100, it could be an index. It could be the QE Al Rayan Islamic Index. So the thing is that we wanted to have an ETF which was for Qatari equities. Now, us being a Sharia-compliant entity couldn't use the QE index, or back then the DSM index, because it had a bunch of banks and other stocks that weren't Sharia-compliant. So we thought we'd set up our own index, and we reached out to you at the exchange, and that was a collaboration. And that index was born in January 2013. And that, I remember that there were some of my bosses and your bosses who announced, or I don't know if publicly or not publicly, but there would be an ETF before summer of 2013, which I thought was very good. It was launched in March 2018. And it wasn't because we all went on a 5-year holiday. It was because it was because we were having to create the regulatory ecosystem from scratch. To put that into English, the regulator didn't know what an ETF was because it wasn't something that was didn't exist in Qatar. They had to be explained. This is what an exchange traded fund is. This is what it does. These are the characteristics. It wasn't just a regulator. And in fact, in Qatar, we're blessed with 3 regulators. So we had to explain this to all of them. On the financial side, we have 3 regulators. We then had to explain this to the external auditors. We had to explain this to the custodians. We had to explain this to the brokers. We had to explain it to the lawyers. A lot of the international lawyers, the international auditors, the international custodians who have businesses in Europe and America, their colleagues all know what ETFs are, but none of those colleagues work in Qatar, or none of those colleagues work in the Gulf. And because it's not a Qatar issue, there weren't any in the Gulf. So this educational process, which Khalifa alluded to, which he had to go through, where the guy was asking him a bunch of questions as to what sort of a strange website are you when you're not charging subscriptions and not selling magazines, and what's your newspaper called, was something that we went through as well. And it was a slow process to bring everybody up to speed. In that time, people in the team got married, had children, had another child, people left the country. It was a long process. The reason it's a good story is because there's a rainbow at the end of it, and that rainbow is that in March, on the 21st of March 2018, we launched the ETF that we're going to be talking about today, and that is the largest Sharia-compliant equity ETF in the world. And that's an achievement for all of us in Qatar to be proud of, that ETF exists in Qatar. So I think it's a lesson in perseverance. It was interesting that just before we launched the ETF, I went and climbed. I went on a climb, and I climbed Kilimanjaro. And I think climbing Kilimanjaro was a bit like doing the ETF, because you just have to keep going, even though you probably don't think you can make it. And at the top, it is when it gets the steepest and coldest, and you're most tired. And that's when when you're very near. And I'm sure Khalifa must have had similar mountain climbing type experiences on many of his businesses, as to the obstacles that had to be overcome. So yes. So that's I think that's the story of trying to do anything for the first time, or doing anything that's a little bit different. It doesn't matter whether it's a business or an ETF or anything else.
Yeah, but that, I think it speaks very loudly to the men that you are. You've persevered and you have established businesses which Qatar can be proud of. We have I Love Qatar, and we have Rayan Qatar ETF today, which are obviously very well-known brands and platform for people to grow, which allows people to grow. So, Khalifa, you have a very large expat following also, and would you like to share some experiences around investing in the stock market that you probably went through, and things that, I won't ask for advice, but things that people need to be aware of, or because you have investment background.
Okay, yeah. So I'd say a couple of things, when it comes to investing, in the stock market. I remember around 10 years ago when anybody would, any of my expat friends, that were interested in investing, they would actually sometimes come to me and say, Khalifa, can you buy me some stocks? And I guess it was just because, there was this mentality, that maybe the process of buying stocks was going to always be quite difficult, and it would just be easier, a Qatari, to go ahead and buy it for them. Of course, I know that there's a strong drive and a push, to encourage, foreign expats, foreign investments, into the country as a whole. But I can tell you that once people discover actually how easy it is, to invest and to purchase stocks, it's actually, in my opinion, easier than investing, in stocks in the US, based from my personal experience anyway. Just because all you do is you simply walk in, you find out what the value is, tell them how many shares you want to buy, and you're just good to go. Whereas I guess maybe more in the US, there's maybe I don't want to use the wrong word, but I would say there's maybe hyper regulation to say, a lot of background check up. Whereas here, maybe because Qatar's stock market is still, in my opinion, in a developing stage, and encouraging, even, I remember actually at one point, somebody, from QSE had got in touch with me asking me, why don't we put the I Love Qatar Media Network, on the exchange as well, potentially, after we hit certain targets. So obviously we're at a point, within in Qatar where we're trying to encourage companies to come on board, as well as individuals, to start investing too. I'm the type of investor, by the way, that I invest in companies, one, that I am interested in personally, so it's a more of an emotional, investment that I put into things. And then second of all, I am a holder, so I don't specifically, trade based on trends alone. I do invest in a business so that I can feel like I am a part of that company's success, and then who knows, 5, 6, 7, 10 years down the line, if I feel like I need to sell the shares, then I will. But from my experience so far, my entire portfolio has actually generated me a profit over the few years. There have been some times that I had wished that I had sold my shares earlier, not because they had dropped, but because I could have made much more profit, before. And in some cases, one of my investments had actually had a 4 times return on my investment, which is pretty amazing. It is pretty amazing, I think. And one of my favorite shares that I've invested in, or favorite banks that I've invested in, their code is called MARK. So I do like Masraf's share, or I should say, their code. Whenever I see that code, I know that I've made a little bit more
on the mark.
They're on the mark. Yeah, that's a better pun.
So yes, that's great, because I think
my bosses will be very happy to hear that, Khalifa, and they'll think I've paid you to say this.
No, 100%. I swear, I don't even mind if somebody wants to follow me. I will share a full list of all of the companies. I can even tell you now, I've invested in Vodafone, I've invested in Saeed, I've invested in Dilala, I've invested in Mark, Masraf, I've invested in who else as well? Baledna. I can share my whole entire portfolio with people. I'm more than happy.
No, that's very kind of you, and that's very generous to share this. But what we'll do is there's a slide later on, there's a slide that Mohsin will come to, which has a bunch of tickers, and you can see how many of those you have invested in, and if
Sure.
depending on how that goes, I'll give you a new ticker for you to add to your list. But we'll come to that later.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, so that's precisely, I think, and I think that it's a good point in discussion where we can move to details into what Qatr ETF is about, because I think before we had these ETFs listed on our exchange, in addition to people asking how they can invest, their second question would be, which stock should they buy? And that has always been a very difficult question to answer, because yes, it's flavor of the month now, but it could go down as well. So there are obviously, if you put all your eggs in one basket, then obviously this could be this could have a negative impact. And that is why we decided that we need to. There's a demand where people in the market are not sure what they should be buying. So we thought we should come up with ETFs, because I think a lot of institutional investors also have realized that there's no point in trying to beat the market by stock picking. Might as well just buy the market. And that's what we do through ETFs. And I would like Akber to give us a bit of details into exactly what the ETF is and how it helps investors make the right decision.
Thank you, Mohsin. So before we go to the next slide, we can just stay on this one, and let me just explain what is an ETF. So you can see on the screen, if you're looking at the slides rather than our three pretty faces, it says Rayan Qatar ETF. So the ETF stands for Exchange Traded Fund. So it's a fund, like a mutual fund, like we have funds in Qatar, we have funds around the world. We in Al Rayan Investment, we have a fund called Al Rayan GCC Fund. These are funds. So for those of you who've invested in funds here or elsewhere in the world, you subscribe either through with a hard copy or online or whatever, but it's a fund. You buy it, you sell it, and it's based on when the fund manager, their offices are open or et cetera, et cetera. And then you get updates probably every month. This is what you invested in. This is the performance. And then you have to wait for next month to understand what's happened, or next week, or however often that's done. If that fund, however, instead of having to fill in a form or to do something else to buy it and to sell the investment, was placed onto the exchange, all you've done is you've got the same fund, but the buying and selling process is not done via forms. It's not done when the offices of the fund manager are open or closed. It's bought and sold on the exchange. So when you buy the share of Al Rayan Qatar ETF, the performance of that stock is the performance of the fund. And the performance of the fund is the index, which is behind it. So basically, when you buy this ETF, and the ticker is QATR, yes, it's like Qatar, because when you want to buy Qatar, then you buy Qatar. You buy QATR. You will get the performance of the index. Mohsin's talked to you about the performance of the index already. So if you compare your own portfolio's performance and it isn't quite as good as the Al Rayan index performance, then the easy way of trying to get that performance of buying the 22 stocks that are in the index at present is to buy the ETF, because you buy that one share, and that share the performance of that stock is the performance of the 22 stocks in the index. So you don't have to buy 22 stocks and sell 22 stocks. You just buy one stock and it gives you that performance. So that's essentially what an ETF is. And Mohsin, if you go to the next slide, please. Globally, this is a $7 trillion industry. It became $7 trillion last month. So you can see that it's been going for about 15 years or so. 15 years ago, it was a $500 billion industry. It got to $1 trillion in 2009. 10, 11 years later, we're at 7 trillion. So the growth has been absolutely exponential. The last 15 months, we've had inflows, even during the pandemic. Every month this year, there have been inflows into ETFs globally. Now, there are 6,500 ETFs globally, of which 2 are listed in Qatar. One is this one, and there's another one as well. These ETFs are, when you buy ETFs, and they're listed in the US, they're listed in Europe, they're listed in Asia, they're listed in the Gulf, in Qatar. They can be equities, they can be real estate, they can be fixed bonds, they can be commodities, they can be a whole bunch of different things. So the reason why this industry has taken the ETFs have taken the investment industry by storm is because they've taken the investors by storm. Because you as an investor, when you buy an ETF, you know exactly the value of your fund investment because you look at the price on the screen, like you do if you bought Mustafa Rayan or you bought Baladna, like Khalifa bought. You don't have to wait for the end of the month for somebody to send you a statement. And if you want to buy it at 9:55 a.m. and sell it at 10:05 a.m., that's up to you. If you want to sell it after 25 years, that's up to you as well. So it's easy, it's cheap, it's convenient, it's transparent because you know exactly what the fund is investing in because it's the index. And these are all the attributes which have made it very, very successful for both individual investors and for institutional investors, people like what we do for a living around the world. So that's really why this is growing like a not even like a train, but like a rocket globally. So if you go to the next slide, please. So this is the share price of the QATR since the day of listing, which is the 21st of March. It pays a dividend every year. So all the companies that it invests in, those companies pay a dividend. The ETF gets all that dividend, 22 of them. So the number of companies in the index go up and down, and therefore the number of companies that you're invested in go up and down. When the ETF gets all those dividends in one go and gets them at different times, and then in one go gives them to the shareholder. So again, from a shareholder perspective, you know you've got one dividend. You don't have to keep track of all the different companies that you've invested in. And if for those of you who haven't invested in the stock market in Qatar, all you do is you give your bank account details to the people when you're signing up for your trading account, and the dividend automatically gets debited or credited to your bank account. So you don't have to go anywhere. So the ETF has paid 3 dividends. It pays them around May, June. This year it was a little late because of the coronavirus. The dividend payments came a little bit late. So when all the constituents of the index have paid their dividends, then the ETF pays investors the dividend. If you go to the next slide, please, Mohsin. So on the 11th of March is when Mohsin reliably tells me is when we reached a bottom in Qatar as far as the market was concerned. Basically, when the WHO declared a pandemic, it was on the 11th of March. Since that period, the QE index, the one which is trading at 9,800 and something, it has gone up 15%. That's quite a nice recovery. The Rayan Islamic index is up 25%. So it's up 25% in the last 6 months. That's quite a nice return, which would be 50% annualized return. So I'm sure a lot of people would like that. The question is your stock portfolio underperforming this or not? And if it is, then some of your allocation, and we always say some, not all, should probably be to this stock as well. Mohsin, next slide, please. So here are the stocks in the index. So on the left, and this is a comparison because we get these questions a lot as well. On the left are the stocks that are in the QE Al Rayan Islamic Index along with their weights in the index. So when you buy the ETF, you're buying those 22 stocks in the same proportions. So if you buy 1,000 Riyal of the ETF, or if you buy 100 Riyal of the ETF, 13.58 of your Riyals will be in industries Qatar, 12.77 will be in Mustafa Rayan, and so on. On the right is exactly the same, but for the QE index, the conventional index. So you can see that there, interestingly, in the conventional index, the largest stock is actually Qatr Islamic Bank, and then QNB, etc. So that is the comparison. And you can see also that the other column is the year-to-date performance, i.e. how much is the stock up? So the largest stock in the Al Rayan Islamic Index, which is Industries Qatar, year to date is down 3%. Mustafa Rayan, which is second largest, is up 4%, and so on. And if you go down towards the bottom, towards the lower end of that table, the star of the index is Dan Holdings, which year to date is up a mere 215%. So if you may not have owned Ezdan, but if you have the ETF, you get access to some of that performance. Ezdan is also in the other index as well. You can see it's in the conventional index. But I think but there are some key differences as to why the Islamic index has significantly outperformed the conventional index. Why is the Islamic index up year to date or flat year to date, and the conventional index minus 5% year to date? And it's partly because of the difference in constituents and difference in, as Mohsin alluded to earlier, the diversification. So 45% of the conventional index is banks. About 20-ish% of the Islamic index is banks. Also, so it's not just, and so it's not just about banks. It's got more consumer stocks. It's got more real estate stocks. It's got, also more importantly, it's got many more of the smaller and medium-sized companies. So if you look at the bottom of this list on the left, you've got at the bottom Qatr Islamic Insurance, Zad Holding. Zad Holding, for those of you who don't know, are the nice people that make Q-Bake. Widam Food, which supplies the primary supplier of lamb and meat to Qatar. Qatar Industrial Manufacturing. Amal, apart from them owning City Center and a bunch of other real estate, they also own Ibn Sina, which a lot of people, particularly during the pandemic, know what that is, because it's the largest pharmaceutical distributor in the country. So there's a number of these companies that are there, which are critical to the country, which you get a little bit of small amounts of exposure to by having the index. It's also the way that the index is created, that even though you may have the same company in both indices, they have different weights, because this index also boosts the weight of a company if it has more daily trading liquidity, and penalizes the weighting of a company in the index if it has less daily trading liquidity, which allows the ETF to trade more freely. Mohsin, if you go to the next slide, please. So twice a year, both indices, because both of them are managed by the Qatar Stock Exchange, are rebalanced. So they basically review what's in the indices. And those dates are 1st of April and 1st of October every year. 1st of October is, as we know, a day after tomorrow. So the index, which was on the previous slide, or the two indices that were on the previous slide, are going to change to be what's on this slide as of day after tomorrow. And the difference in the Islamic index is that Baladna is going to be 5%, which is different. You also have some other reductions in some of the weights, and the other stock that is entering the Islamic index, Mohsin, I'm having a blank. Can you remind me which the other one is? Oh, we only have one.
Sorry.
Okay, sorry, Qatr Camco, Qatr. Sorry, no, I'm just trying to remember which is the other stock that is entering the, Mazaya. Mazaya is entering the index. So that is the change. Also, Baladna is also entering the conventional index. You can see it fourth from the bottom. It's 1.3%. So Almira, for example, is leaving the conventional index, but it's still 5% of the Islamic index. So there are differences in the two indices in terms of from a stock by stock point of view. Next slide, please, Mohsin.
Yeah, and just for the, I think, benefit of the audience, just think of these indices as portfolios and how much you're putting in your portfolio. So like a Rayan index, this is how you would build your portfolio. And in QE index, that's the proportion of various companies in your portfolio. That's, in a nutshell, what index is.
And it just so happens that the portfolio of the Islamic stocks has significantly outperformed over a long period of time this portfolio of conventional stocks, and that's essentially the sales pitch on that. Just so, what is the ETF? Why should somebody buy the ETF? I mean, apart from the fact that you have this portfolio, so there are a few different characteristics to think about. One is that, and this is probably more for the viewers that are either very wealthy individuals, which I'm sure there are many of, or in companies, that sometimes the daily trading liquidity of a stock is a constraint. If it doesn't trade enough, institutional investors like ourselves are unable to buy and sell them because we have large portfolios. You know, at Al Rayan Investment, we manage more than $1 billion or more than 4 billion real of client money. So we can't be buying and selling stocks which trade 200,000-300,000 real a day. The ETF has something, it basically has a broker, which at the moment is the group securities called the liquidity provider. But the job of the broker is to provide as much liquidity, as many shares to buy and sell at any price. So you can buy one stock is 2 real and 32 dirhams right now. So you can spend 2 real and 32 dirhams, or you can spend 232 million real and you can buy the same, but you can do the same thing. So it doesn't really matter. You can't do that with pretty much any other stock in Qatar. Another thing which is something which is particularly relevant for a lot of, I know Qatari investors like to do this, but not only Qataris, a lot of expats do this as well, is they like the dividend attractiveness of stocks in Qatar. So what they do is, because dividends are generally paid in February, March, they buy a stock with a high dividend in, say, December or January, and then they get the dividend, and as soon as the dividend is paid, they sell the stock. So that means they've got cash in their pocket. What happens with most companies, though, is, and this is what this chart on this screen shows, the gold line here is the share price of QATR, the black line is Qatar National Cement, the orange line is Qatar International Islamic Bank, and the blue line is Medicare, which is Ahli Hospital. This is the performance around the dividends of these companies in February, March this year. So what it tells you is that in the 5 days prior to dividend payment, you have pretty stable or slightly rising share prices because people are buying ahead of the dividend. Then you have the dividend day where the stock drops. And then in some cases, the stock keeps dropping because people are like, well, I only bought it for the dividend is gone, so I just want to offload my position. So the point is that if you bought a stock at 100 and the dividend was going to be 4, on the day that the dividend is paid, the share price should become 96. So 4 has now come into your pocket, which is the dividend, and the share price should be left at 96. If the share price is now at 92, that means you've lost money. It wasn't a very good trade. And that's what you can see with the orange line and the black line, where in some cases they're down 15-20%, even though there was a small dividend. Whereas the ETF, that cannot happen because the ETF tracks the index. Unless the index plummets, the ETF has to stay at the same price. So if you want to harness or harvest a roughly 4.5% dividend, which is what the dividend yield of the ETF is, it's a very, very good way of doing that. If you want to buy in probably April or March, April, and sell after the dividend, you can do that. So there are many different things that ETFs are used for. Dividends is one of them, but also, frankly, a lot of people just use them for performance because you can see the track record. The performance is pretty strong. So Khalifa, the ticker that I wanted you to be aware of to add to your list is QATR. That's what I wanted you to add to your list because if the stocks that you have aren't doing as well as the QATR is, then you probably need to do a little bit of reallocation.
Inshallah.
So
I think maybe we should take the opportunity just to maybe answer some questions that have been asked. Do you want to do that now?
Yeah, I think because I have my eye on the time as well. So there have been a number of questions asked. One is around how you can invest in the QATR ETF. Can you invest it through? So, I mean, basically, you need to have an account with one of the brokers. The list of the brokers is available on the Qatar Stock Exchange website, qe.com.qa. And once you have an account with the broker, then you can start investing in the stock, just like, in the ETF, just like any other stock. You can buy it off the market. You just place the order to buy it to your broker, and the broker buys it for you in your account. You need an account if you are an individual living in Qatar. Of course, you have a bank account in Qatar. But if you're somebody living outside, your bank account is outside, you can still open an account with a broker and trade in the market. Then there are questions around uh, basically to invest into it, do we have to follow the same process? Yes, it's the same thing. One of the questions is, what are your plans to make QATR more attractive for investors? You want to take that, Akber?
What are the plans to make QATR more attractive for investors? Even more attractive?
Okay, I think we'll take that. Maybe Khalifa here, you might want to share your experience. I mean, you're counting your portfolio. How do you see? Are you convinced with the pitch Akber has made?
Well, I mean, I'm not
Do you
here
see
to
any benefits?
endorse QATR yet, without my personal experience, with it. What I can say specifically is that there are a lot of different companies that are online that are basically trying to encourage people to mirror professional investors' portfolio. And what I see that QATR is doing is helping to simplify the process for people to invest in a diversified, portfolio that can, in many cases, outperform a regular portfolio, if that's the right way of of defining it. Based on, of course, what was described, in terms of being able to ensure that you wouldn't get a loss in sale after allocation on dividends. I think that's definitely attractive. The fact that there is a focus on Sharia-compliant businesses, absolutely, that is also something that's very attractive. And of course, the fact that what did you say, Akbar, the minimum amount was for investment?
2 riyal and 32 dirhams.
You see, so I mean that's something that anyone can dip their toes into to just simply try it out. And honestly, my recommendation, the way that I got started off when I was investing, is I literally took 1,000 riyals, and I just wanted to see what I could do. It's almost as just me learning and practicing and seeing how well I could do. At one point, I can say, over the time of my investment, I had made over 400,000 riyals, in profit. So that was something, that I was extremely, proud of and happy, that I was able to achieve. Now, what I want to be clear to everybody that's watching this is that, when you invest in the stock market, there are no guarantees. But what you can do is you can try to reduce the risk as much as possible. And to me, it seems like QATR is trying to reduce that risk as much as possible and hopefully give you some good gains.
Yeah, I think that you're spot on, Khalifa. I think that is precisely the reason why ETFs are offered and are so popular with investors globally, that it has become a $7 trillion market, because not everybody, especially retail investors and many times professional investors also, can bet on the winning horse and know which stock will do well. And that's why if you buy the market, even Warren Buffett has advised to his wife that after he is gone, all the wealth should be put, some in US treasuries and some in cash, but most of it should be invested in the S&P 500 ETF. Because that's the only thing he can trust his wife with, an ETF.
What I would suggest is for people who haven't tried investing in Qatar before, is by all means invest in some of the individual companies that you like for whatever reason. As Khalifa mentioned, there may be companies that you are passionate about. You're either going to be a Vodafone or a Ooredoo customer. If you really like your operator and you think for whatever reason you want to buy shares, buy them. If you hate both of the operators, then don't buy them. Whatever it is, if you find a company for whatever reason, and it's not just because it could be because you like Baladna milk, or it could be for any other reason that you like. buy some shares to see how it feels and to see how they perform, and do it in small size, exactly what Khalifa said, but also buy a little bit of the ETF, just to see, as a reference, to see how that performs. Because if you find that the shares that you're buying individually are doing very, very well, that's fantastic. But your shares, by definition, even the shares that we have in our portfolio, may outperform the market for some periods of time, but not all periods of time. So it's just adding diversification. So I think that's a very useful thing. But while I would never say to somebody, put all your money into one stock, because you're getting no diversification. If anything happens to that one company, something goes bad. If you were to have some of your money in Qatr equities, you can do that in ETF because you're diversified just by one stock. But for all of you, whether you are, regardless of your nationality and where you're from, whether you're from here or elsewhere, you should always diversify. You shouldn't have all of your money in any one asset class. You shouldn't have all your money in any one country. You shouldn't, if possible, have all your money in one currency. All of us earn in dollars. So if you buy gold, you're still buying dollars. Whether you are from Qatar or not from Qatar, you should have exposure to other currencies as well, because what happens if the dollar collapses? So, people talk about stocks, people talk about real estate, people talk about sukuk or bonds or gold, etc. So diversification is key, because none of us can see the future, and none of us know exactly which stock or which asset class is going to be the superstar for the next 2, 3, 5 years. So that would be my advice that I would give to everybody, regardless of whether they have 1,000 reals to invest or 100 million reals to invest.
I mean, the way that I see it is that, okay, if you consider yourself, like a professional, person, who investor that's ready to build a portfolio based on studying and market research and understanding, what the trends are, that's great. But if you're looking for professionals to do that job for you, that'll simplify your life, then QATR seems like an easier option, a more convenient option. Instead of wasting your time doing all of that research yourself. I mean, right now I think everybody will tell you, because of COVID, because of what's been going on around the world, when it comes to pharmaceuticals, when it comes to foods and goods, when it comes to even raw materials, like aluminum and so on, those are things that are becoming quite scarce, and something that a lot of people are searching for and trying to buy. And so you would have that knowledge, you would invest into a business, and then you would start to track your portfolio. In this case, you wouldn't need to worry about thinking about all of that, because QATR could help you out. That's the way I see it.
Sure, no, absolutely. But I'm just stressing that that would be for the Qatari equity part of what people have invested in. They shouldn't just have all their money in Qatari equities or in the stock market of any country. It should be diversified. Mohsin, there was a question about tax, and that's just maybe just mention that one of the nice things about investing in Qatar, like we have no income tax, we have no capital gains tax, we have no wealth tax. So all the returns that you see on these slides and these charts, and all the dividends that you see, are all tax free, like all our other income in Qatar. So that's relatively easy. Any other questions which we haven't touched on, which are in the Q&A?
No, I think we have generally covered most of it. There are questions around potential future ETFs, but I think we can touch base on that in another webinar, when we will have a specific webinar on that ETF in future, inshallah. But I think there's a question around general investment outlook in different sectors in Qatar. And here I would basically like to pose this question both to you, Khalifa and Akber. From a real economy point of view, which sectors do you think booming as we build further towards the World Cup 2022? And Akber, yourself also, if you would have any view on various sectors on the stock market. Khalifa, I'll start with you.
Honestly, that is a very tough question, because I think that all sectors are going to be definitely benefiting with the World Cup coming up, in a couple of years. And investment is just going to be ramping up by the end of this year. That's just going to happen. What would be that magical sector, to invest in? I mean, obviously, I wouldn't be able to say specifically, what that would be. But I think my suggestion, because I don't want to say anything, that would end up, giving the wrong advice to someone, and then they would say, Khalifa said, or Mr. Q said. But what I will say is just think about what are all of the things that everybody is going to need when they come and visit Qatar for the World Cup. That's what I'm going to say. Think about that, and that will help point you in the right direction.
I couldn't agree more, but I'm going to be a bit more specific because that's what I get paid to do. I will tell you 3 stocks for free. So, I mean, what Khalifa is saying is 100% correct. And we actually, when we buy or sell, we take a 18 to 24 month investment horizon. The wonderful thing about the World Cup is that it didn't come as a surprise to anybody. We've known it since the 2nd of December 2010. That on the 21st, well, we didn't know the exact date, but we knew then that in 2022 this is going to happen. We now know that on the 21st of November 2022, the World Cup will start. That's when the opening match will be, and the 18th of December, which is National Day, is going to be the final at the stadium in Lusail. So we're looking forward to the fireworks on that day, World Cup final and National Day. So the thing is, the one way to just to say exactly what Khalifa said, but in a slightly different way, we're having a huge party. So if you imagine that you're inviting in your house, your apartment, wherever you live, you're inviting 2,000 people for dinner. You think, oh my God, how am I going to cope with 2,000 people? Well, maybe you want to slightly expand your house, or break a wall and make the living room bigger, or whatever else. That's all the infrastructure building that's going on. And the hotel building, and the road building, and the stadium building. Stadium building is like the dining table. It's where the guests are going to come and eat the food, so to speak. It's not that important. But then you're going to have to do a lot of other stuff. You're going to have to, if it's a huge event, then you want caterers. You want people to do lighting. You want people to do, maybe you want extra carpets. You want people to have music. Maybe you want somebody to, you want to have some entertainment, etc., etc. So think about all of these things, all of these people that are there. You want people to serve your guests, perhaps, because you can't deal with 2,000 people in one go. They're going to have to come to your house to prepare. And in our case, our country, or the country that we all live in, 12 to 18 months before the event to start doing this. Just the cabling between the live cameras in each stadium to be able to do the replays, which you now have in football, where the referee can go and check whether something happened in the box for a penalty. All those cameras have to be rigged up, and we don't have one stadium, we have 8, and then it all has to be broadcast live. The people who do the cabling are going to come 18 months before the World Cup to start doing the cabling. They're going to be having, somebody has to bring the cabling, somebody has to bring the cameras, somebody has to bring all the equipment, somebody has to bring all the merchandises and all the cheesy t-shirts that we're all going to be buying, and the caps and the scarves and the flags and everything else. And then we're going to have this surge in population that's going to come with all these people, plus the actual visitors. So the simplest way to think about this is that we're going to have a jump in population for several months, and we're going to have a huge amount of extra consumption, and we're going to have a big logistics operation. So I'm going to actually tell you 3 stocks, and we can do another webinar in January 2022 and see how it 2023, see how it went. Based on what I've said, it isn't rocket science to think that Gulf Warehousing and Baladna and Almira should do quite well. See, now it's on the record.
And all 3 of them are in QATR.
That's a complete coincidence.
You know what? Let me also tell you that I have been toying with the fact of putting Store 974 on the exchange. And I can pretty much guarantee you, based on what's been, and we invest, by the way, in technology equipment and PC components, as well as gaming stuff, with the focus in Qatar on esports as well as physical sports, and with the hardware that's going to be needed. Maybe that's going to be a stock. If we get on the market, maybe Akber, that's going to be a stock you're going to want to recommend too.
I'm excited about it already. Where do I sign up?
So yeah, I think that would bring us to the conclusion. Towards the end, I just wanted to summarize. We have been talking about QATR, Qatar. We all love Qatar, and it offers growth in long term and protect toward down markets as well. It offers income, as Akber mentioned earlier, also that it offers opportunity to receive dividends twice through your portfolio of stocks, and then you sell them and you buy the ETF again and you get the dividends again. Last but not the least, it offers the diversification, which offers you the sustained returns and the income. So that's QATR Qatar for you. With that, I would say keep loving Qatar. And thanks everybody for joining, especially Khalifa.
I have one thing which I just wanted to add is
Sure.
that I forgot to tell people that we actually have a website which is dedicated for the ETF, which bizarrely is qatr.com.qa. So if anyone has any questions or wants to find out more about the ETF, you can go to qatr.com.qa. As for what we do at Al Rayan Investment, that is on alrayan.com, which is separate. So somebody's asking to share that link on chat. Mohsin, if you could do that. I don't know how to. If you
Sure.
can just write qatr.com.qa somewhere. Or all of you just Google QATR. It can't be that difficult.
And I'll tell you what, Akbar, I'm considering now selling a third of my portfolio and putting it into QATR. Let's see what happens.
My goodness. Now the pressure was on you an hour ago. Now the pressure's on me for the next 2 years.
All right, gentlemen, I think.
Mohsin, I guess my final statement that I wanted to make is that, look, at the end of the day, whether you set up your own business or whether you invest in a startup or whether you decide to go into the exchange, whether you want to go and invest in an ETF, there are so many options that are available to people to generate an income and also to just invest in generally. Whatever path you choose the thing that's going to be the something that you are interested in, you're passionate about, and something that you're going to be comfortable with. So I just want to encourage people, though, to invest. A lot of people, they sit in their money, and the money that they sit on or they just leave in a bank account is just withering away. You might as well invest it into something that will help you to add onto whatever it is, whatever amount you have in your account. So invest it, let your money work for you.
Yeah, that's exactly what the message is. Thanks for summarizing it very beautifully, Khalifa. And that's what we try to explain to a lot of your followers, the expats in Qatar and the younger generation in Qatar also, that we all, for the last 10 years, have been working together to build the country to achieve the growth it has achieved. While in Qatar, as guests in Qatar, we have been earning and saving in Qatar, but why not also earn the dividends while we are helping build the country? So I think that's the message to the younger generation. Invest for your future. With that, I would like to thank Khalifa, Mr. Q, Akber Khan from Al Rayan Investment. Thanks for your candid and yet very engaging discussion. Hopefully we will meet again with another exciting topic. Till then, thank you and goodbye from all of us.
Thank you, Mohsin, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you.